Some people wait their whole lives for a door to open, and the moment it finally does, they step aside so someone else can walk through it wearing their name. Denise Carter was 29 years old, a home health aide in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of woman who showed up early and left late and never once asked for credit. She drove a Honda with 200,000 miles on it. She sent money to her mother every second Friday. She had raised herself on discipline because nobody else was going to hand her anything. Her cousin Renee Carter was also 29, born 4 months apart, raised in the same house for a stretch of years when both their mothers were struggling. People used to call them the twins. But Denise built things quietly, and Renee wanted the world to watch her build nothing at all and still call it success. Renee posted every morning. Coffee cup, ring light, caption about manifesting abundance. She hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. She borrowed money from anybody who'd still pick up her calls, and most people had stopped picking up. "You still doing that home health thing?" Renee asked one Sunday at their grandmother's table, syrup dripping off a forkful of pancake. "Wiping folks down for $12 an hour, $14.50, Denise said. "And it's honest. Honest don't pay rent. Neither does a ring light." Aunt Odessa laughed from the stove. A low, knowing laugh, the kind old women give when they've already seen how a story ends. Aunt Odessa was 71. Everybody in the family believed the same simple story about her: retired school cafeteria cook, modest brick house on Booker Street, widow for 18 years since Uncle Ray passed young from a heart attack, living off Social Security, and whatever the church potluck sent home with her in tinfoil. Nobody asked how she'd paid off that house in 9 years. Nobody asked why she drove a plain gray Buick when the woman clearly had more sense than that car suggested. Nobody asked because nobody thought to. Poor old women who cook for a living don't get asked questions. They get pity, a little love, and forgotten birthdays. That Sunday, Aunt Odessa sat down slowly at the table, pressed a hand flat against her chest, and said, "Baby, get my pills off the counter." Denise was up before the sentence finished. Renee kept eating. That was the difference between them, and everybody at that table had known it their entire lives. Nobody said it out loud. But before this year was over, the whole family would learn exactly how much that difference was worth, and exactly how far one woman would go to steal it. Aunt Odessa's heart trouble had been building for 2 years, quiet the way most serious things are quiet before they aren't. She waved off every suggestion to see a specialist. "I raised 4 children and buried a husband," she'd say. "A little chest pain isn't going to be what does me in." Denise didn't argue with her. She just started coming by Booker Street twice a week, unpaid, unasked, checking the pill organizer, sitting with her aunt on the porch swing while the older woman told stories about Uncle Ray and the years right after he died, when she had nothing and 2 bobbies and a stack of bills higher than her patience. "You know, I almost lost this house," Odessa said one evening, rocking slow. 1998. "Bank called it in. I sat in that kitchen and cried till I couldn't breathe." "What you do, figured it out," Odessa said, and her eyes went somewhere far away. "That's what you do, Denise, you figure it out. Ain't nobody coming to figure it out for you." Renee, meanwhile, had moved back in with her own mother after her third apartment eviction in 5 years. She still posted the same captions: manifesting, abundance, divine timing. She'd started selling a skincare line that mostly sold to people who already knew her and felt too guilty to say no. She resented Denise in a way she never said plainly, only sideways. "Aunt Odessa likes you better," she'd mutter. "Always did. Doesn't like me better. I show up. I got things going on, Denise. Not everybody's trying to spend their whole life wiping down old folks." But something in Renee had started watching Aunt Odessa more closely too, not with care, but with calculation. She noticed the way Odessa's lawyer, a sharp older black man named Mr. Bishop, came by the house every few months with a leather folder. She noticed the way Odessa always sent Renee out of the room first. She noticed a UPS envelope once, addressed to Odessa Marie Carter, Holdings LLC, and Renee's stomach did something strange when she read it. Holdings. What did a retired lunch lady need with holdings? She never asked Aunt Odessa directly. She started asking around instead, an old family friend at the county clerk's office, a cousin who worked in real estate. What she found made her sit very still in her car for 20 minutes before she could drive home. Aunt Odessa didn't just own the Booker Street house. She owned 3 commercial properties downtown and was the majority shareholder in a regional chain of funeral homes worth, by Renee's rough count, somewhere north of $4 million. Renee sat in that car and thought one thought, clear as a church bell. Somebody was about to get all of that, and it was not going to be Denise. Renee didn't sleep that night. She lay in her childhood bedroom running numbers she barely understood, dreaming up a version of herself standing in an office with her name on the door. She started showing up on Booker Street more, the way a fox starts showing up near a henhouse, slow, casual, always with a reason. She brought Odessa flowers. She sat through church with her. She learned to fake patience the way she'd learned to fake everything else, and for a woman who'd spent a lifetime reading people at their weakest, Odessa noticed. She just didn't say so yet. "Been around a lot lately," Odessa said one afternoon, testing. "I want to be closer to you, Auntie. Denise gets all the time with you. I want mine too." Odessa studied her for a long moment, the kind of look a woman gives when she's deciding whether to believe a lie she already knows is a lie. "That's so." Meanwhile, Denise's life kept moving in its plain, steady rhythm. Her agency offered her a lead caregiver position, more responsibility, a small raise. She took her mother to a doctor's appointment. She helped Odessa fill prescriptions and never once asked what was in the envelope stacked on the hallway table. Then on a Tuesday in March, Odessa collapsed in her kitchen. Denise found her 20 minutes later, unresponsive on the linoleum, and the next several hours moved like something underwater, ambulance, hospital corridor, a doctor with a careful face saying words like cardiac event and stabilized and will need to watch her closely. Odessa woke up 2 days later, weak, her speech slightly slowed on one side, her right hand trembling when she tried to hold a cup. The doctors called it a minor stroke layered on top of existing heart strain. She would recover most function with therapy. But for now, she was, in the language of the hospital paperwork, temporarily unable to independently manage her affairs. Mr. Bishop arrived within the hour, folder in hand, face grim. "Odessa," he said gently, sitting by her bed, "we talked about this. If something happened before the transition was finalized, we agreed there'd need to be a temporary decision-maker. Someone to hold the door open till you're steady enough to walk through it yourself." Odessa's eyes moved to the doorway, where both her nieces stood. The hospital room went quiet in a way that felt louder than noise. Mr. Bishop explained it plainly, for everyone's benefit, though his eyes stayed mostly on Odessa. Years ago, quietly, without a single family member knowing, Odessa had begun structuring her holdings into a trust meant to pass to whichever of her nieces proved, in her words, steady enough to carry it. She'd been watching them both for years, longer than either of them realized, gathering proof the way a woman gathers proof of everything important in her life, patiently, silently, without announcement. She hadn't finalized the transfer papers yet, Bishop said. That was scheduled for next month. Now, given her condition, there needs to be a temporary power of attorney to keep the properties and the funeral home operations running smoothly until she's recovered enough to finish the process herself. Renee asked, too quickly. Bishop looked to Odessa. Odessa, her voice thin but her eyes sharp as ever, whispered one word: "Denise." Renee's face didn't move, but something behind it cracked clean through. Denise stepped forward, stunned. "Auntie, I don't know anything about running property, about a funeral home." "You'll learn," Odessa breathed. "Same way I did." Bishop set a folder on the bedside table. "I'll need her signature on the temporary authorization. Standard procedure. We can do it this week, once she's more stable, or now if she can manage a signature." Odessa's trembling hand lifted, slow, toward the folder, and that was the last thing Denise clearly remembered before a nurse rushed in over an alarm on the monitor and pushed everyone into the hallway. Odessa's heart rate had spiked. She was sedated, stabilized again, but the doctors were firm this time: no visitors, no paperwork, no stress, minimum 48 hours of total rest. The folder stayed on the bedside table. Renee watched it the whole time they were pushed out of the room, and something in her calculated exactly how many hours 48 actually was, and exactly what a person could do with a folder, a signature, and a family that trusted her enough not to watch her closely. Renee had spent her entire adult life practicing to be someone else in front of a camera. It turned out that skill had other uses. She'd grown up close enough to Denise that she knew her cousin's handwriting the way you know a song you've heard 1,000 times, not perfectly, but well enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking hard. She'd watched Denise sign birthday cards, grocery lists, time sheets. She practiced in the hospital parking lot on the back of a receipt until her hand ached, until the loops in the D and the slant of the C started to look almost right. Almost right was all she needed. Nobody at Bishop's office had ever seen Denise's real signature up close. Why would they? Denise had never needed a lawyer in her life. 2 days later, while Denise was pulling a double shift across town, unaware anything had moved at all, Renee walked into Bishop's office wearing a plain blazer she'd borrowed, introduced herself with Denise's name, and signed the temporary power of attorney with a hand that barely shook. "Your aunt speaks very highly of you," Bishop said, sliding the paperwork across the desk. "Says you're the steady one." "She's not wrong," Renee said, and meant every word of it about herself. By the end of the week, Renee, legally, on paper, as far as the county and the bank and the funeral home managers were concerned, was Denise Carter, temporary authority over $4 million in property and business interests. She moved fast. She met with the funeral home's general manager, a careful man named Elijah Poe who'd run day-to-day operations for Odessa for over a decade, and introduced herself as the niece stepping in during the emergency. "Denise," Elijah said, studying her a beat too long. "That's right. MS. Odessa's told me about you. Said you were quiet. Didn't expect," he paused. "Didn't expect you'd want changes so fast." Because Renee did want changes and fast. She wanted a company credit card issued in her role. She wanted access to the operating accounts, framed as necessary for payroll continuity. She wanted, most of all, for people to start calling her Ms. Carter in a tone that made her chest swell. Elijah didn't argue. It wasn't his place to argue with a signed authorization. But he made a note quietly, the way careful men do, and kept watching. For 3 glorious weeks, Renee lived a life she'd only ever performed for a phone screen. She drove Odessa's Buick at first, then quietly leased herself something newer using funeral home funds she classified as operational necessity. She sat in the manager's office at the downtown property Odessa owned and put her feet up on a desk that had once belonged to a woman who'd built it from nothing. She told herself this was owed to her. She told herself Denise would understand eventually, that family shares, that this was just getting there first. She started posting again, cryptic captions about new seasons and doors finally opening, careful never to say specifics, savoring the mystery of it. Denise, meanwhile, was confused and increasingly uneasy. She'd been told Odessa needed rest, no visitors for a stretch, that Renee was helping coordinate things while their aunt recovered. It sounded strange, but grief and worry make people accept strange explanations, and Denise had a full caseload of patients and a hospital-worn heart that just wanted her aunt to get better. Then Elijah Poe called her directly. "MS. Carter, this is Elijah over at Heritage Family Services. I wanted to confirm a signature on the Fairview account transfer." "I haven't signed anything," Denise said, confused. "I haven't been to your office." Silence stretched on the line. "You were in 3 weeks ago," Elijah said slowly. "Signed the temporary authorization. We've been taking direction from you since." Denise's stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Mr. Poe, I have never once been to your office. I don't even know where it is." Elijah didn't argue with her, but his voice had changed, gone careful and low. "Ma'am, I think we need to have a conversation. Can you come in today?" Denise sat across from Elijah Poe that afternoon, and the woman he described walking through his office door 3 weeks earlier was, item by item, unmistakably her cousin. The blazer, the confident, borrowed manner, the signature that was close but laid beside Denise's real one on an old-time sheet Elijah had pulled for comparison, was clearly, upon close inspection, not quite right, the D too rounded, the pressure too even, missing the small hitch Denise's hand always made at the end of her last name. "I need you to understand what's happened here," Elijah said carefully. Someone impersonating you has had signing authority over accounts worth low seven figures for 3 weeks. Payroll's gone out under her direction. A vehicle lease was opened. Funds moved from an operating account to something called Carter Image Consulting LLC. Denise felt the room tilt. That's Renee's business, her skincare thing. Elijah's jaw tightened. Then I think we both know who's been sitting in your name. Denise didn't scream. She didn't cry, not yet. She sat very still, the way her aunt had taught her without ever meaning to teach it, and thought clearly through what needed to happen next, because falling apart wasn't going to fix a single thing that had already been broken. "Need to see my aunt," she said. "She's still restricted from visitors, but I'll call Bishop. This affects the trust directly. He needs to know today." Denise drove straight to the hospital, and for the first time in 3 weeks, the nurse at the desk didn't turn her away. Something in her face must have said this couldn't wait. She found Odessa sitting up in bed, thinner than 3 weeks earlier but alert, sharper-eyed than the doctor's notes suggested she should be, watching the door like she'd been expecting exactly this visit at exactly this hour. "Auntie," Denise breathed. "Renee's been pretending to be me. She's been running your business, money's moving, I don't." Odessa held up one steady hand, and something in her face was not surprise at all. "I know," she said quietly. "I've known for 11 days. Denise stared at her aunt, uncomprehending. "You knew? Auntie, how could you know? And I wasn't sedated as long as everyone thought," Odessa said, and there was something almost tired in the way she said it, tired and old and a little bit sad. "That heart monitor scare, that was real. But after the second day, I was awake more than the charts said. I told the nurses to keep it quiet. I wanted to see what would happen if nobody was watching." "You let her do this." "I let her show me who she was," Odessa said. "There's a difference. I've suspected for 2 years that girl would do something like this if the door ever opened wide enough. I just needed to know for certain before I signed anything permanent. A woman doesn't hand $4 million to somebody based on hope, baby. She hands it based on proof." Denise sat down slowly in the chair beside the bed, her mind reeling backward through every quiet Sunday, every folder Odessa sent Renee out of the room for, every test disguised as an ordinary afternoon. "There's more," Odessa said. "Bishop's been documenting everything from the start, every transfer, every account she's touched. Elijah's been reporting to him the whole time too. Renee thinks she's been getting away with something. She's been building her own case file for the last 3 weeks. Didn't you stop it sooner? She could have done real damage." "She has done real damage," Odessa said. "That vehicle lease, that business transfer, that's real money, and it's going to matter in what comes next. But I needed the damage to be real enough that nobody in this family could ever again say I was too hard on her, or that I judged her unfairly. I needed her to hang herself with rope she pulled off my own shelf." Odessa reached over, took Denise's hand in her thin one, steadier now than it had been in weeks. "Your job now isn't to fix this quietly and let her slide out the back door. Your job is to sit still and let this finish the way it needs to finish." Renee had no idea the ground beneath her had already given way. She spent that week planning a rebrand for the funeral home's marketing, hearing her own friend as a consultant at an inflated rate, and telling herself the family would understand, eventually, that she was simply better suited for this than Denise ever could be. She told her mother in confidence that things were finally turning around, and her mother, wanting badly to believe her only daughter had turned some long-awaited corner, chose not to ask too many questions. She scheduled a walkthrough of the downtown commercial property with a real estate agent, discussing terms for selling off a portion of it, framing it to Elijah as liquidity Aunt Odessa herself wanted explored. Elijah listened, nodded, said he'd need Bishop's sign-off, and made another quiet call the moment she left his office. She had not, in 3 full weeks, once gone to visit her aunt in the hospital. That detail, small as it seemed, mattered more than anything else in the entire unraveling. Because on the Thursday of that 3rd week, Odessa was discharged, moved into short-term rehabilitation at a facility close to Booker Street, alert, walking with a cane, speech nearly back to normal, and fully aware, thanks to Bishop and Elijah both, of every transaction made in a name that wasn't Renee's own. Bishop called a family meeting for that Saturday. He framed it deliberately as a trust update, giving no hint of what was coming. Renee arrived confident, dressed sharp, already composing in her head the acceptance speech she imagined she'd soon be giving. Denise arrived quiet, uncertain what to expect, having promised her aunt she would sit still and let it finish. Dessa arrived last, wheeled in by an aide cane resting across her lap, eyes moving across the room with the unhurried patience of a woman who had waited a very long time for this exact moment to arrive. The room was Bishop's largest conference space. A long table, Odessa's family gathered around it, her sister, both nieces, a cousin who'd driven in from Rock Hill, and standing quietly by the door at Bishop's invitation, Elijah Poe. Odessa didn't waste time. 3 weeks ago, she said, her voice slow but clear, somebody walked into Mr. Bishop's office, signed legal documents under my niece Denise's name, and took control of accounts worth over $4 million. Room went still. Renee's confident posture didn't shift yet, but her eyes did, quick and searching. That person, Odessa continued, leased a vehicle in that stolen name, transferred funds to a business she personally owns, scheduled the sale of property that was never hers to sell, and in 3 full weeks never once visited the hospital bed of the woman she claims to love because she was too busy enjoying money that wasn't hers. Auntie, I don't know what you're, Renee started. Don't, Odessa said, and the single word landed like a closing door. Mr. Bishop. Bishop opened his folder and slid 3 documents across the table, the forged authorization, the vehicle lease, and a bank transfer record with Carter Image Consulting LLC clearly printed at the top. Beside them, he laid Denise's real signature from an old employment form, and the forged one from the hospital paperwork, side by side. The difference, once you were looking for it, was impossible to miss. Elijah confirmed the woman in his office 3 weeks ago, Bishop said quietly. I have his written statement here. I also have hospital visitor logs for the last 21 days. He turned the visitor log around so the table could see it. Denise's name appeared 11 times. Renee's appeared 0. Renee's face had gone the color of old paper. I was going to explain everything once things settled. I was helping. Somebody had to step up while I was unconscious, Odessa finished. You stole my dead husband's name off a signature line and spent his memory like it was yours to spend. Nobody in the room spoke for a long moment. Even Denise, who had known this was coming, felt her chest tighten watching her cousin's face crumble in real time. I didn't think it would hurt anybody, Renee finally said, her voice small in a way nobody had heard from her in years. I thought I'd get things running, prove I could handle it, and everybody would just accept it once it was done. I thought success would just make the how of it not matter. That's the whole problem with people like you, Odessa said, not cruel, just plain and tired. You think the ending erases the beginning. It never does. Not for me. Not for God. Not for the law. Bishop cleared his throat. Legally, this constitutes identity fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of trust assets. Ms. Carter, he nodded toward Odessa, careful with the shared name, has the right to press charges. I'd advise it, frankly, given the dollar amounts involved. Room held its breath. Renee's mother put a hand over her mouth. Denise looked to her aunt, half expecting fury, half hoping for mercy, uncertain which one was coming. Odessa was quiet a long moment, her cane tapping once against the floor, thinking. I'm not going to press charges, she said finally, and relief flickered across Renee's face before Odessa kept going. But she is going to pay back every dollar. The lease is getting returned this week. The business transfer gets reversed by Monday, or Mr. Bishop files the police report himself, and I will not stop him a second time. And she will never, for the rest of her natural life, hold a single signature, title, or dollar tied to anything I built. Auntie, please. I raised you same as I raised her, Odessa said, nodding toward Denise, her voice cracking just slightly for the first time all afternoon. Same house some years, same food, same church pew. One of you learned that a family's trust is the most expensive thing in the world to earn back once you've spent it carelessly. The other one didn't learn that yet. Maybe she will now. Maybe this is how. Fallout moved fast once it started. Renee's mother, humiliated in front of the family, stopped covering for her daughter's excuses for the first time in Renee's adult life. And something in that withdrawal of quiet protection hurt Renee more than the money ever had. Word moved through the family the way it always does, careful and quiet at first, then plainly, until every cousin and aunt and family friend knew exactly what had happened on Booker Street. Renee lost the skincare clients who'd only ever bought from her out of family loyalty once that loyalty ran out. She lost the leased car within the week, repossessed the moment the funeral home's accountant flagged the lease for reversal. She moved out of her mother's house not because she was forced to, but because she couldn't sit at that dinner table anymore under the weight of what everyone now knew. She got a job, finally, an ordinary one, retail, 40 hours a week, and it was the first job she'd held longer than 3 months in half a decade. Nobody celebrated it out loud. Nobody needed to. It simply was what it was, a woman starting over from a place lower than where she began, because she tried to skip every rung of a ladder that everyone else had to climb honestly. Elijah Poe, for his part, was quietly promoted to a director role. Odessa created specifically to reward the kind of loyalty that watches carefully and reports honestly instead of looking away. "You could have stayed quiet," Odessa told him. "Easier for you if you had." "Wasn't my money to protect quietly," Elijah said. "Was yours." Denise, meanwhile, spent those weeks the way she'd spent every week of her life before this one, showing up, working, checking on her aunt during rehabilitation, never once asking what she stood to gain from any of it, because gain had never been the reason she showed up in the first place. Odessa's recovery stretched into early summer. She regained her full speech, most of her strength, and every bit of the sharpness that had built $4 million out of a dead husband's insurance check and a decade of 16-hour days nobody had ever seen her work. One evening in June, sitting on the Booker Street porch swing again, she finally told Denise the whole story, the one she'd never told either niece in full. 1998, when I almost lost this house, Odessa said. A woman at my church, older than me, no family of her own, she loaned me the money to save it. No paperwork, no interest, just told me, pay it forward when you're able and don't tell a soul I did it. I asked her why. She said, because somebody did it for me once and it changed my whole life. This is just the debt moving to the next person who needs it. Denise listened, quiet, rocking slow. I built everything after that with her rule sitting in the back of my mind, Odessa continued. Buy property, build something steady, give people jobs, especially our people. In a business nobody wants to think too hard about, but everybody needs eventually. And when it came time to hand it off, hand it to somebody who understood that the whole point was never the money. It was always what the money lets you do for people who have got none. Didn't you ever tell us any of it? Because money changes how people look at you before it ever changes what they do for you, Odessa said. I wanted to see who you both were before either of you knew there was anything to gain from being seen. Mr. Bishop finalized the trust transfer that August, in his office. No folder tricks this time, no forged signatures, just Denise's real hand signing her real name on paper that had been 3 years in the making before she'd ever known it existed. She didn't quit her home health job right away. She kept 2 of her longtime patients out of loyalty, working mornings, learning the funeral home business in the afternoons under Elijah's patient teaching, sitting in the same manager's chair Renee had briefly occupied, except she never once put her feet on the desk. She used a portion of that first year's profits to set up a small emergency fund at the church, quiet, unglamorous, the exact kind of thing nobody posts about money set aside for families one missed paycheck away from losing a house, the same way her aunt had once been. Renee came to church one Sunday in October, months later, thinner, quieter, sitting in the back instead of near the front like she used to when she wanted to be seen. She found Denise afterward in the parking lot. "I'm not asking for anything," Renee said before Denise could speak. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, not the kind of sorry I say to get something, the other kind." Denise studied her cousin for a long moment, the 2 of them raised in the same rooms, fed at the same table, and grown into 2 entirely different answers to the same question of what a person does when nobody's watching. "I believe you," Denise said finally. "That's a start. Starts take time." A year passed. Aunt Odessa still lived at Booker Street. Kane retired to a closet health steady, holding court every Sunday at a table that had somehow gotten a little more crowded, a little more honest. Denise ran the trust now in full, her name on the door of an office that used to belong to a woman nobody thought to ask a single question about. Because poor old women who cook for a living rarely get asked what else they might be capable of. Renee was still rebuilding, slow and unglamorous, the kind of rebuilding that doesn't make a good highlight reel and doesn't need to. She'd started quietly without posting about it, paying back the last of what she owed, one modest check at a time. One evening, Odessa sat both nieces down at her kitchen table, the same table where this had all begun with pancakes and a sideways comment about honest work not paying rent. "Want you both to hear this once together," Odessa said. "What you build honestly, you get to keep. What you take by lying, you only get to borrow, and life always collects the interest, one way or another. I built everything I have on that truth. Your cousin tried to skip past it, and it cost her more than any signature ever could. And you," she said, looking at Denise, "you never once asked what you get for showing up. That's exactly why everything got handed to you in the end." Said anything for a moment. Outside, the evening settled soft and gold over Booker Street, over a house that had almost been lost once, 26 years earlier, to a debt nobody could see coming, saved by a stranger's quiet kindness, and grown since into something far bigger than four walls and a mortgage. What belongs to you will always find its way back to you in time, honestly. What you take by force will always, eventually, burn your hands. That was Aunt Odessa's whole life in one sentence, and now it was Denise's too.